The harpoon gun, the grapple gun, the gripper, whatever your preferred noun for the new harpoon gun coming in Season 14 is, it's gonna change the game. I'll proudly or shamefully admit, I was certainly an advocate for this bad boy, but as time has gone on and various changes have occurred, things aren't looking too hot when this MF lands next month. And I'm a little concerned it's going to completely change the game. At least, player versus player. PvE will be bloody hilarious. Briefly, the harpoon gun has two effects. It can pull you towards any geometry, such as islands, fort emplacements, or even ships. The other function is that it can pull players or loot items towards you, resulting in an easy steal or closing the distance between you and your enemies. All of this sounds amazing, but it's essentially going to make boarding piss easy, which is something that doesn't really need a buff in this game. It's great when two equally matched crews attempt to board one another, but when the crews are vastly different in skill level, it just becomes an exercise in clubbing seals. Naval is less like that, but there's still an element to it. The point is, the game is going to become Flying Monkey Simulator, even more so than it is now, with a certain funny little crumfling? Did I say that right? I know that's slated to be patched eventually, but it is indeed an exploit, and the harpoon gun will be an intended mechanic. My biggest concern at this point in time is the balancing rares already done around an item that's not even in the game, and wasn't due in for another 2 months when those changes occurred. Yes, I'm of course talking about the blunderbuss changes. Something that should have been a minor adjustment has been some sort of crazy buff, to the point it makes boarding a pain in the ass whether you're defending or attacking. This comes from two things: the stupidly large knockback, as if Mike Tyson and Butterbean punched you at the same time, and the removal of the one shot. These were intended to make the harpoon gun not overpowered when it launched. I see the design choice because people will just be using the harpoon gun to close the distance and one-shot the other players, be it pulling a player closer or the harpoon user getting closer. That would be boring as fuck. But now it's just going to be a case of boarding a ship, shooting a player off and then having them removed from the ship. But oh wait, they have the harpoon gun and can come back for more. It's going to be like that series Assault on Giant, or whatever that shit is. I am very much in favour of adding new tools to the sandbox, and even criticise some tools from Season 12 for being too weak. But also praise the Burning Blade for being as strong as it is. Here, there is a middle ground to be had. From what we've seen of the harpoon gun, I can't see how it can release without pissing off a bunch of people. And I'll just say it, it's going to fundamentally change the game, whether you like it or not. I can't believe I'm about to say this, since 6 weeks or so is probably not enough to change this, but it's probably best to delay the harpoon gun to get it right. Season 14 has a bunch of other sandbox changes to pad out the season, so one element of that missing isn't exactly going to gut the content. There's still chest hiding, new stealth mechanics, and blow darts as well. It would also nice to see some stuff coming out mid-season, like in Season 6, but that's another video. The approach with the additions in the past has always been add them, regardless of insider feedback or not for the most part. Sometimes they're right to, sometimes not. Like the double barrel took a month or two to improve, but the first impressions make a big difference. With something as crazy as the harpoon gun, dropping it into the game and fixing it a month or two later is not a good idea. Now, I'm not going to sit here and moan without giving some suggestions. It's not a good idea to scrap something because the community has a collective bitch about it. The way the harpoon works is simply point, shoot, teleport. And that works on any geometry at all. Firstly, while easier to do in this form, it's just kinda easy. In other games, grapple guns tend to have an element of physics and momentum. Well, this will probably fling you if you use it on a tree on mast. It doesn't appear to have that satisfying swing. In other games like Apex Legends or Halo Infinite, you can use the grapple to pull yourself towards something, but if you arc it, you can be flung further. This will allow you to reach higher heights, and it actually requires an element of skill. This would also open up the space for using that momentum to board from an island or fort, not just pointing, shooting, and teleporting. Let's be honest here, it would be hilarious to swing around the island like Spider-Man 2, but maybe that's too powerful. Another suggestion, which would balance it out but make it a bit too irrelevant, allow it to not work on ships. But you can use it freely around the islands, forts, etc. with infinite ammo. That way it becomes a traversal tool for the island and not an instant board mechanic. You just have to sacrifice a gun for the mobility option, like people already do with the sword. On the other hand, the double barrel was mainly a PvE tool, and it's really not good in PvP, which was kind of a point of criticism and still is to this very day. The throwing knife was a much more viable option for both. If we're going to go with a middle ground, make it so the harpoon gun can only attach to the mast, as well as the island geometry of course. I personally reckon this is the best option for several reasons. One, you have a smaller target, much like chain shots, that reward you greatly for being accurate with the weapon. It still allows the weapon to be viable in PvP with the previous drawbacks of sacrificing one weapon. The best one though is that it protects sloop players and balances the weapon automatically around the ship sizes, with galleons having 3 targets to aim for versus 1 or 2 with the sloop and brig respectively. Let's be honest, big crews will just send a bunch of boarders to spam smaller ships with this. Previously, the sloop's size, speed and maneuverability allowed it to avoid boarders easier, but now that margin will decrease significantly. At least this way, they actually have to hit a thin piece of wood to get on board. Season 14 generally looks awesome, and it feels like it will be a quintessential Sea of Thieves update, but this one thing looks like it will overshadow all the exciting stuff being added to the game. The harpoon gun is coming, but it's not too late to tweak this bad boy because Sea of Thieves is being turned on its head in October if not.